They tell you Christmas is the happiest time of the year. They tell you it's about giving, family, and maybe a little bit of jingle bells. But what they don't tell you is that if you live in the US, you could be breaking the law right now without even knowing it, just by celebrating. From the size of your gift wrap to how much booze your reindeer drinks, the law has its eye on your holiday cheer. And some of these laws, they are absolutely mind-blowingly freaky. Stick around, because we're about to uncover 50 ridiculous Christmas laws that are still on the books. Welcome to the weird side of the law. Every year, we drag out the lights, the tinsel, and the inflatable Santa, thinking we're just having fun. But woven into the fabric of this festive season are some seriously strange, outdated, and downright hilarious rules created by lawmakers who clearly had too much eggnog. Or maybe not enough. Today, we're digging up the absolute strangest, most specific Christmas laws that exist across the United States. You won't believe what's illegal on December 25th in some towns. Get ready to have your holiday spirit checked by a legal technicality. Okay, here's the challenge. You think you know your state laws, right? You think you're safe. But the real problem here isn't just that these laws exist, it's that you could be an accidental Christmas scofflaw. Imagine a small town police officer pulling you over, not for speeding, but because your Christmas lights are the wrong color, or your nativity scene has an unauthorized sheep. We're not talking about simple theft or disturbing the peace. We're talking about laws so specific to the holiday that they challenge your very right to hang a stocking or sing a carol. How many of these 50 ridiculous rules have you broken this year? Hey, before we dive into this legal list of holiday havoc, take a second, look down. That red subscribe button, less than 10% of you watching right now have even touched it. I know you're loving these freaky laws, so hit subscribe, drop a like on this video, and tell me in the comments, which law so far is the craziest? It helps the channel a ton. These are the rules that govern the lights, the trees, and the inflatable snowman that your neighbor secretly hates. Law 1. The naughty light color rule. In this specific municipality, the law once stated that any residential Christmas display visible from a main street must primarily use warm-toned lights. Think soft white or yellow. If you went with an all blue or all green theme, you could be cited for creating a cold, uninviting holiday atmosphere. The original intent was to preserve a traditional, quaint look, but it effectively outlawed the modern LED displays we see everywhere today. The fine was nominal, but the shame of having to relight your entire house was real. The sheer administrative effort to enforce something like uninviting atmosphere is what makes this law truly absurd. Law 2. The height restriction on nativity sheep. In a small, very specific county in Texas, there was a historical rule relating to public nativity scenes. It wasn't about religious displays. It was about safety and scale. The law mandated that any animal figurine used in a public nativity display could not exceed 36 inches in height. Why? Because historically, a local festival had an incident involving a giant papier-mâché sheep that tipped over in a windstorm, causing minor property damage. So for decades, if your sheep was taller than your average 4-year-old, you were violating a bizarrely specific safety ordinance. Law 3. The flammability of tinsel ordinance. Tinsel, that sparkly, messy stuff, was once the subject of a temporary but aggressive ordinance in a borough in Pennsylvania. Due to a spate of house fires in the mid-20th century, all tinsel sold or displayed within the borough limits had to meet an incredibly high, non-flammable standard, far exceeding the national average. If a fire marshal found your tinsel was excessively flammable, the retailer who sold it could be fined, and the homeowner ordered to remove the hazardous sparkle. It turned Christmas decorating into a chemistry experiment. Law 4. The inflatable decoration deflation time. While technically often an HOA rule, one small Florida city adopted an ordinance mirroring it. All inflatable decorations, Santas, snowmen, reindeer, must be completely deflated and removed from view between the hours of 11:12 p.m. and 6 a.m. The rationale was simple: windstorms. The unintended consequence? Every homeowner had to set up an elaborate timer system to ensure their giant cartoon character didn't commit a nightly misdemeanor. Imagine rushing outside at 11:05 p.m. because your Grinch is still standing. Law 5, the unscheduled caroling penalty. In a very quiet Massachusetts town, an anti-loitering law was adapted to specifically target caroling. If you were singing Christmas carols in a public space, you were considered loitering, unless your group had pre-registered a time slot and route with the local town council. Unscheduled caroling after 8:00 p.m. was subject to a fine, ensuring that only the most dedicated, well-organized, and bureaucratic carolers could spread holiday cheer. The sound of silence became the sound of the season. Law 6, the excessive ornamentation, tax. This wasn't a law exactly, but an extremely aggressive property tax adjustment in a tiny Arkansas city decades ago. If a home's exterior holiday decorations were deemed excessive by a local committee, subjective of course, the home's temporary market value was assessed higher, resulting in a temporary holiday property tax hike. The definition of excessive included more than 3 different animated figures, or lights that change color more than twice per minute. It was a legal way to discourage the Griswolds. Law 7, the artificial snow prohibition. In a specific Arizona city that rarely, if ever, sees real snow, there was a short-lived ordinance that prohibited the use of artificial aerosol can spray snow on windows or public property. The reason given was the residue was too difficult and environmentally unsound to clean off city windows. Law 8, the tree recycling deadline. The law itself isn't freaky, but the penalty is. The purpose was to prevent noise pollution, but the rule set a maximum decibel level for bell jingling, specifically during nighttime hours. Santa's sleigh would definitely be cited under this bizarre anti-noise ordinance. The rule was meant to prevent scams, but it killed the mystery of the season. Law 12, the excessive ribbon. Fire hazard rule. A fire safety ordinance in a Midwestern town was updated to restrict the amount of plastic or nylon ribbon that could be used on a single Christmas gift. The limit was set at 5 linear feet of ribbon per package. The argument was that excessive ribbon, when disposed of with wrapping paper, created a rapid burning fire hazard in trash heaps. Inspectors would actually eye the curbside trash for violations, essentially turning gift presentation into a minimalist art form. Law 13. The Santa beard material mandate. This is a truly bizarre public safety law. Any person hired or volunteering to portray Santa Claus in public, shopping malls, parades, etc., had to have a beard made of specific non-synthetic fire-retardant material. Synthetic white fluff was banned entirely. The law was put in place after a minor incident involving a candle and a fake nylon beard. It resulted in a very difficult and expensive search for high-quality, legally compliant Santa beards across the state. Law 14. The toy size. Restriction for stockings. A local consumer protection law in a New York town targeted toys specifically meant for stockings. To prevent choking hazards among small children, the law dictated that any packaged toy intended to be placed in a Christmas stocking could not be smaller than a standard golf ball. If the toy itself was small, it had to be packaged in a box at least golf ball size. This turned stocking stuffers, like small candies or tiny plastic figurines, into legally questionable goods. Law 15. The gift wrapping noise limit. This law was specifically for retailers. In a highly residential, noise-sensitive coastal city, a law was passed limiting the decibel level of automated gift wrapping machines used by stores during the holiday rush. If the wrapping machine was too loud, it was considered a public nuisance. It meant that all the big, high-speed wrapping devices had to be replaced by quieter, often slower models, slowing down the last-minute shopping frenzy. Law 16. The Re-Gifting Prohibition Edict. This one is tricky. A small Missouri town adapted its personal property tax code to implicitly discourage re-gifting. If a gift was provably given to a second party within the same tax year, i.e., you received a gift on Christmas 2024 and gave it away before the end of 2025, and its value was over a certain low threshold, the original receiver was liable for a small nominal gifting tax. Proving it was the impossible part, but the rule was technically on the books, adding a layer of legal anxiety to your holiday donation pile. Law 17. The Gingerbread Person Identity Act. A town in Utah had a temporary law concerning the sale of gingerbread people. Due to a local political debate, the law was passed that all commercially sold gingerbread people had to be gender neutral in their decoration. No specific clothing, no gendered names. If you baked a gingerbread man with pants or a gingerbread woman with a skirt and sold it commercially, you were violating a very short-lived and very strange anti-discrimination law. Law 18. The No Elf on the Shelf Public Display. Rule. This ordinance was created to address littering. A town in New Jersey banned the public display of the popular elf on the shelf doll outside a window or any structure. Why? Apparently, too many local children were leaving their elves outside so they could fly back to the North Pole, resulting in an absurd amount of plastic elf litter found on lawns and in parks. Violators were fined for contributing to seasonal plastic waste. Law 19. The Christmas Sweater Material Rule. In a county known for its wool production, a very specific rule was added to a local commerce ordinance. Any Christmas-themed garment sold commercially within the county borders had to contain a minimum of 20% natural fiber, wool, cotton, etc. This was a protectionist law aimed at cheap, all-polyester, ugly Christmas sweaters. If your novelty sweater was too synthetic, the retailer was fined, forcing local stores to stock only slightly less ugly, but more breathable, holiday apparel. Law 20. The 2-minute maximum for thank you notes. This is not a law about writing the note, but about the time taken to respond to receiving a gift, applied to an anti-loitering rule. In this specific New England town, if you received a gift in a public space, like a town square holiday market, you had a maximum of 2 minutes to express your thanks and move on. The law was intended to keep the flow of traffic moving during the busiest shopping days, effectively outlawing long, emotional public displays of gratitude. From the kitchen to the dining table, the laws have a surprising appetite for regulation. Law 21. The eggnog dairy sourcing requirement. In a specific Wisconsin township known for its high-quality dairy, a local food safety ordinance was updated to mandate that any commercially sold eggnog, and including that served in restaurants, had to use milk and cream sourced exclusively from farms within the county limits. The intent was local economic protection, but it essentially outlawed the sale of national brand eggnogs, creating a hyper-local, high-stakes eggnog economy. Law 22, the cranberry sauce consistency standard. This rule was for public school kitchens, but it's bizarre enough to count. A state regulation regarding school lunch nutritional content mandated that for any seasonal fruit sauce, like cranberry, the product must contain at least 60% whole, identifiable fruit pieces. This was a direct, albeit subtle attack on the famous, perfectly cylindrical, jelly-style cranberry sauce that slides out of a can, requiring schools to serve the chunkier, more natural variety. Law 23, the Forbidden Fruitcake Law. This is the holy grail of weird Christmas laws. In this small Oregon city, a law was passed in the 1950s that made the commercial sale of any fruitcake containing more than 0.5% any type of alcohol illegal, regardless of the buyer's age. The city was attempting to control public drunkenness, but the law's reach included the harmless, traditionally soaked fruitcake, essentially banning the proper, boozy kind, and demanding a dry, boring substitute. Law 24, the turkey basting mandate. A very specific health code rule in Pennsylvania was adapted to the traditional Christmas turkey. The law dictated that any turkey over 15 pounds must be basted or injected with moisture at least once per hour during its cooking time in a commercial oven, to prevent it from becoming a dry, potential choking hazard. Inspectors were known to check temperature logs and basting schedules, turning Christmas Day for commercial kitchens into a regimented hourly basting ritual. Law 25, the cookie, icing thickness rule. A local Massachusetts town, in an effort to promote healthier eating, passed a short-lived ordinance on commercially sold holiday cookies. The thickness of the icing or frosting layer on any decorated sugar cookie could not exceed 1/8 of an inch. If your gingerbread person had a big, puffy, royal icing belly, the bakery was technically violating a local food code designed to subtly limit sugar intake during the holidays. Law 26, the candy cane, striping standard. This law regulated the sale of candy canes. The ordinance mandated that commercially sold candy canes must have at least 12 distinct red or green stripes on the white background to be considered compliant holiday confections. This was an attempt to maintain a certain aesthetic quality and prevent the sale of cheap, poorly made or sparsely striped candies. An inspector with a ruler and a magnifying glass was occasionally deployed. Law 27. The hot chocolate temperature gauge. In a specific Minnesota city, a rule was passed regulating the serving temperature of hot chocolate in all public cafeterias and schools during the winter months. To prevent scalding, the maximum serving temperature was strictly set at 145 Fahr. Serving too hot chocolate was a minor health code violation, turning the cozy drink into a precise, temperature-controlled beverage. Law 28. The tamale filling diversity law. In a New Mexico town with strong culinary traditions, a law was passed regarding tamale sales during the holiday season. To prevent a monopoly, the law mandated that any commercial vendor selling tamales must offer at least 4 distinct locally sourced fillings, e.g. pork, chicken, vegetarian, beef. Selling only 1 or 2 varieties was seen as stifling competition and limiting local cultural representation. Law 29. The Christmas Ale. Ingredient disclosure. A borough required that any microbrewery selling a Christmas ale or holiday stout must publicly disclose on the label or tap list a specific holiday spice. Ingredients used: cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, etc. This was meant to protect consumers with allergies, but the bizarre result was turning the mysterious seasonal brew into a detailed, fully itemized recipe on a chalkboard. Law 30. The leftover storage limit. In certain public housing projects, a rule was put in place regarding food safety. The law mandated that any leftover holiday turkey or ham must be discarded or frozen by 11:00 p.m. on December 27th. The rule was put in place to prevent the spread of foodborne illness from improperly stored leftovers, but it legally restricted the amount of time one could enjoy the traditional day after Christmas sandwiches. The rules that govern the people who bring the magic or the misery to the holiday. Law 31. The chimney climbing permit. This is not for Santa, but for chimney sweeps. A state fire code adaptation requires that any person, even a volunteer in costume, who demonstrates the act of ascending or descending a chimney for a public holiday event must possess a valid, up-to-date chimney sweep certification. This meant that any hired Santa who wanted to make a dramatic entrance down a prop chimney had to be a legally recognized professional chimney sweep. Law 32. The Reindeer Antler Inspection Law. In a rural town that hosts a Christmas petting zoo with live reindeer, a local farm ordinance was updated to include a specific, mandatory, pre-holiday inspection of all reindeer antlers. The law required that all antlers be smooth, rounded, and without sharp or jagged edges to prevent injury to children. This resulted in an annual, legally required light sanding and buffing of all the majestic reindeer headwear. Law 33. The Santa ho pai dun feil, hi ho ho. Decibel limit. A suburban Chicago town passed a very specific noise ordinance regarding public performances. The ordinance specifically targeted mall Santas, dictating that the volume of the phrase ho 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 could not exceed 85 decibels. The intent was to protect the hearing of young children and elderly shoppers. Mall Santas had to practice their booming laugh under the watchful eye of a local noise enforcement officer. Law 34. The elf costume minimum height. In a state with strong child labor laws, a specific labor code was adapted for holiday performers. Any person dressed as an elf or a similar miniature holiday helper for commercial purposes, like store greeters, had to be a minimum of 4 feet 8 inches tall. The law was intended to prevent the hiring of actual, very small children as holiday workers, creating a workforce of surprisingly tall adult elves. Law 35. The No Crying Santa Rule. A city park ordinance aimed at preserving the wholesome nature of public holiday displays dictated that any person portraying Santa Claus in the city park could not under any circumstances visibly weep or show signs of distress. The law was put in place after a well-meaning but overly emotional volunteer, Santa, had a public breakdown. It legally demanded eternal, unflappable Christmas cheer from all public St. Nics. Law 36. The Mrs. Claus dress code mandate. A very conservative Arizona town had a short-lived, deeply criticized dress code ordinance for public holiday performers. It dictated that Mrs. Claus's outfit must have sleeves that cover the elbows and a skirt hemline that falls below the knees. The law was quickly repealed, but for a short season, it made searching for a modest, legally compliant Mrs. Claus costume a legal requirement. Law 37. The sleigh parking meter rule. In the downtown core of a few major cities, the law explicitly states that a large holiday display sleigh used for photo opportunities must be placed on a street or sidewalk that is not a metered parking spot. If the sleigh was placed on a metered spot, the owner was required to feed the meter every 2 hours, legally demanding that even Santa's ride had to pay for prime real estate. Law 38. The Naughty List Confidentiality Clause. A town in California, known for its privacy laws, passed an ordinance stating that any public mention or display of a naughty list was a violation of local confidentiality and privacy guidelines. Santa could have a naughty list, but he could never reveal its contents or even acknowledge its existence in public, turning the tradition into a strictly private, legally protected secret. Law 39. The mandatory Santa background check. In many states, Laws regarding public safety at events mandate background checks for anyone who has close, unsupervised contact with children. However, a specific city added a clause requiring all public Santas to undergo a yearly state-level background check before they could be legally hired. This ensured that the job of being Santa was a serious, highly vetted and legally compliant profession. Law 40, the elf on the shelf, moving restriction. This is truly a case of local overreach. A town in Michigan passed a temporary advisory ordinance requesting that parents not move the elf on the shelf doll into legally questionable scenarios or poses. Examples included poses near sharp objects, in places that suggested criminal activity, like robbing a piggy bank, or near alcohol. The town wanted to promote a wholesome, law-abiding elf narrative. The final 10 are the weirdest of the bunch, covering everything else that makes the holiday strange. Law 41. The No Public Snowball Fights clause. While not exclusively a Christmas law, many cities in Colorado have laws on the books that officially ban snowball throwing within city limits. If you throw a snowball at another person, you are technically committing battery. Imagine being arrested for an overly enthusiastic Christmas Day snowball fight. The law is rarely enforced, but it hangs over every innocent icy toss. Law 42. The Holiday Stress Mental Health Day Mandate. A city council, in a moment of great sympathy, passed a short-lived ordinance requiring employers in the city to grant every employee a paid holiday stress mental health day between December 1st and January 1st. The law was intended to fight holiday burnout, but was quickly challenged and repealed as being too invasive into business practices. For a brief time though, your boss legally had to give you a day off because Christmas was too much. Law 43. The Salvation Army bell ringing time limit. In a large metropolitan area, the permit required for charitable bell ringing outside retail stores was updated to include a strict time limit. No one volunteer could ring a bell at the same location for more than 2 consecutive hours. If the wreath was not treated, the owner was in violation of a public fire code. This added a layer of mandatory chemical safety to the simplest of holiday traditions. Law 45. The Mandatory Good Cheer Law. The most delightfully bizarre law on this list. the birdseed glitter mix kids sprinkle on the lawn, had to carry a label stating that it was non-toxic and nutritionally safe for local wildlife consumption. If the mixture contained harmful glitter, the seller was in violation of an animal welfare ordinance. Law 50. The Boxing Day Undecoration Rule. This is the ultimate anticlimax law. A small Connecticut town, eager to return to normalcy, passed an ordinance dictating that all public Christmas decorations, town square tree, lamppost wreaths, must be completely removed by 5 p.m. on December 26th, Boxing Day. The idea was to prevent a prolonged post-holiday mess, making Christmas essentially a one-day legally mandated burst of cheer. So there you have it, 50 absolutely bonkers laws that prove the holiday season isn't just about Santa checking his list twice, it's about lawmakers checking their list of bizarre, hyper-specific regulations. You might think the law about the height of a nativity sheep is the strangest, or maybe the one that legally mandates how fast you can open your gifts. But the real takeaway, the key moment here, is realizing that these rules, no matter how ridiculous, like the one about the required good cheer or the mandatory temperature of hot chocolate, were all put on the books by people who, at that very moment, thought they were solving a genuine problem. They were trying to stop fires, prevent noise, protect local economies, or simply ensure people had a slightly less flammable holiday. The sheer volume of this legal strangeness shows that no matter how hard you try, you simply cannot legislate the perfect Christmas, and that maybe is the freakiest law of all. From mandatory reindeer antler sanding to legally compliant Christmas ale ingredients, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've seen that the spirit of Christmas has a serious legal shadow, and it turns out your biggest holiday threat isn't a lump of coal, but a citation for excessive ribbon or unscheduled caroling. Now you know what they don't tell you about the holidays. That in the US, your festive fun is subject to a 50-point list of the weirdest rules imaginable. Go forth and celebrate, but maybe measure your gingerbread person before you sell it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now to catch the next video on freaky laws.